Hey, it's Ollie, and in this video we're going to talk about haircuts, of all things, and haircuts as a language learning tool. An amazing, undervalued, underappreciated language learning tool. So what am I on about? Well, I've been pretty lucky in my life in that I've been able to live in quite a few different countries for long periods of time. And one of the things that happens when you live in a country for a long period of time, more than a couple of months at least, is that you've got to get your hair cut. And this a lot of people find quite scary. And actually explaining how you want your haircut is a very difficult thing to do because it's got very, very specific sort of semi-technical instructions that you've got to give to the hairdresser. Okay, and unless you actually study that stuff specifically, it's pretty difficult to know to be able to do. But it's not that bit which I want to talk about. It's all the peripheral stuff. Everything that happens whilst you're in there getting your haircut. So recently I was in Hong Kong and I was getting my haircut in this downtown area of Hong Kong called TST, which is a very kind of busy, bustling local place. And my hairdresser there is a guy called Penny. And he's like very kind of straight talking, no nonsense type of local guy. And so when I go in there, I've got to talk to Penny in Cantonese. Now, in most situations when you're abroad, it's pretty hard to get extended periods of language practice, right? Most people on the street are not going to stop and talk to you for 5, 10 minutes, even 1 minute. It can be hard, right? Most of the time, the people that you speak to are going to be people in shops and things like that. People who you have some kind of transactional reason to talk to. Now, I guess a hairdresser is also a transactional type of thing. The difference is that it takes a lot longer. Now, when I get my haircut in Hong Kong, for some reason, you kind of get all the trimmings, right? So you go in and they wash your hair slowly and they give you kind of head massage, and then you go and you get your hair cut and it takes a while, and you go and wash your hair again. All this kind of palaver, which takes a lot of time. In total, it's often about an hour and a half to 2 hours to cut this, which is a long time. But the thing about that period of time is you are forced to speak the language that whole time. Force might seem like a strong word, but you've kind of got this social contract going on when you're getting your hair cut, which is that the hairdresser feels obliged to speak to you and to ask you questions and to make conversation, and you feel obliged to reply, even if it's in a language you're not particularly comfortable with, or you're in the middle of learning. If you are there kind of face to face with someone who's doing something for you, like cutting your hair, you feel pretty rude not making every bit of effort you can to actually interact and talk to the person. And so what happens is when you've got this, when you kind of sat there for even half an hour, in my case recently it was an hour and a half to 2 hours, what happens is you go through this very interesting kind of journey over the course of that time. The first kind of 10, 15 minutes or so can be a little bit tough. You're kind of finding your ground. You're getting used to speaking the language, and then you kind of settle into a bit of a routine, and then a bit of a rhythm. And then after half an hour or so, what can happen is the kind of tiredness can set in. So you suddenly get really tired. Oh man, I can't talk anymore. My head feels like it's going to explode. You kind of reach this pain threshold of speaking the language, which if you've ever spoken your target language for extended periods of time, you know what I'm talking about, right? So your brain just can't handle anymore. But a strange thing seems to happen after that, whenever that kind of pain threshold gets reached, which is when you come out the other side, it's like you've shaken it all off, and the language just kind of, you've just kind of really found your rhythm with the language, and you're just kind of speaking it without thinking. It's almost as if like you've kind of got used to the pain and the tiredness, and you just don't care anymore. You just talk. And whenever I've got my hair cut in different countries, I've been through this similar experience where at the beginning it's kind of a little bit painful, and then you kind of pass the pain threshold, the tiredness barrier, and then by the time you come out, you've actually spent an hour at least or more in there speaking in the language. And it's a very special situation when you've got someone who will actually just be there and make conversation with you, the so-called sympathetic listener or sympathetic speaking partner, someone who will even if you're not very good at your target language, that person is then he or she is going to make the effort to speak and communicate with you and make conversation irrespective of your language ability. And so this pushes you, it can push you in a way that you might never otherwise be pushed in the language. And this can lead you to a kind of feeling of confidence and ability in the language, which can be a huge confidence boost. It can have a lot, and then have a lot of knock-on effects to the rest of what you do. I found in this most recent experience that after this kind of hour and a half, 2 hours of speaking Cantonese non-stop with this guy, it seemed to elevate me to a level that I hadn't been at for some time. A level of kind of feeling so confident speaking the language, I'd be pretty happy kind of walking up and just making conversation with anybody, no matter how local or how kind of colloquial the vibe was, which is a pretty special feeling. Now, for many people, this might sound like hell on earth. If you are someone who maybe suffers from some social anxiety or is not particularly confident speaking your target language, you may hate the thought of being put in this kind of position. And indeed, it can be quite uncomfortable. It's not the kind of situation that I necessarily relish myself. But you cannot deny the effects, and you cannot deny the benefits of that kind of exposure and that kind of interaction with somebody who doesn't care about the language. And this is the point here. In this kind of situation, the hairdresser doesn't care whether you can conjugate your verbs, whether you've got the right, you've got the right vocabulary. It's not about the language, it's about the interaction. And this is, I think, a real opportunity for you if you are kind of looking for ways to elevate your language to the next level, to reach new levels of comfort and confidence in your language. It's to look for opportunities like the hairdressing situation, the haircut situation, where you can engage in an activity where the language itself is not the point, where speaking the language or being judged on your language ability is not the purpose of that activity. Often as language learners, we have our head stuck in the books. We do language exchanges, we go to classes. The language is always the focus. But when you get your hair cut, the language is not the focus. The focus is on actually communicating and speaking with the guy or the girl. Like that, there are many other similar situations that you might be able to put yourself in. Can you take salsa classes like I did in Japan, in Japanese? Can you go and do yoga classes? Can you sign up to, I don't know, can you take a course of some kind or an evening class that's conducted in the language that you're learning? Anything like this where you are put into contact with other people who you can then speak with independently of being judged on your language level, where your mutual focus is on something else that not only gives you a chance to speak the language, but to also bond with them socially, because again, you've got this shared experience which has nothing to do with the language. Again, it's not for everybody, but I think reaching higher levels in a language requires you at some point to be in these situations where you are focused on the human connection rather than the linguistic connection. And for me, the best way in the world to do that is with haircuts. So if you ever, next time you're traveling abroad, go and get a haircut, see what happens, and report back to me. You can leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about your haircut experiences or anything else, any other way you found to get that kind of exposure to the language. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you back in the next video sometime next week.